Now, let's return to our main story. The Royal Bank of Scotland, which has confirmed that its chief executive, Stephen Hester, will not accept a bonus worth almost £1 million. That's after days of controversy.
Yes, the RBS boss had been under growing pressure to decline the shares, as his bank is largely owned by the taxpayer. Well, the Chancellor, George Osborne, said it was a sensible and welcome decision.
The RBS boss, Stephen Hester, may be out of sight this weekend, but his bonus was very much in the public mind. His decision to waive a £1 million bonus may have been forced by newspaper headlines suggesting he was in line for a much bigger payday than originally thought, and his chairman's decision to reject an even larger bonus. Pressure had been added when the Work and Pension Secretary, Ian Duncan-Smith, said that few would be happier than the government if Mr Hester handed back his bonus.
It's for him individually, obviously, to make a decision about that. As a member of the government, I don't have a collective opinion on that, but I must say to you, nobody would be happy with the government if, of course, he took such decisions, but it's up to him.
But perhaps it was Labour's tactical intervention to force a House of Commons vote on the issue which finally persuaded the RBS boss to renege.
Over and above their basic pay, which is now around £1 million a year, they get £3 to £3.5 million on top by way of bonuses and incentives on average. And that means that pound for pound of turnover that they manage, they are the best paid in the world by a country mile. And I don't think the performance of the companies they run or the British economy justifies what they're being paid.
Mr Hester's decision to waive his bonus won't go down well in the City of London, which may view it as government meddling in the private sector. It might also make other large UK banks such as Barclays uneasy as they prepare to announce their annual bonuses in the coming weeks. Joe Lynham, BBC News.
Quick look at the share price. RBS down this morning. The FTSE itself is down 0.5%, but Royal Bank of Scotland down 2.2%. Let's talk to Norman Smith, our chief political correspondent, who joins me now from Westminster. I mean, this was not going to be a question of if, but when, and that argument of a Commons debate and vote on it, that swung it, according to Stephen Hester.
Yeah, although Downing Street are saying, although the Prime Minister put no direct pressure on Stephen Hester, they say ministers were putting on pressure by interviews and interventions they made. I suppose the question now is whether the Stephen Hester is the end of the saga or the beginning of a much bigger re-examination of the bonus culture in banks, as Labour's Chuka Umunna was calling for this morning. Well, joining me now is the former Lib Dem Treasury spokesman, Lord Oakeshott. What do you think should happen to the other RBS bonuses? We know, I think John Hurricane, their head of their investment bank, is in line for potentially up to £4-5 million in bonuses. Do you think that has to be looked at as well?
Yes, I do. Britain is sick of bankers who help themselves before their customers. Stephen Hester was right to give up his bonus, but he's failed the big lending target that RBS signed up to last year to lend to small business. And I really think that there needs to be a real crackdown on the 323 people at RBS who earned on average 1.1 million last year. I mean, the RBS Million a Year Club is about as hard to join as Weight Watchers.
Maybe it would encourage Weight Watchers to shed more pounds if they were offered a million bonus. But I mean, what happens to these people at RBS, and do you think the government should directly intervene, or should they just follow Stephen Hester's example?
Well, we shouldn't have got to this point. I mean, it was a very bad way to deal with Stephen Hester's bonus that it had to be stopped under extreme pressure, and to be frank, not from the government, who were defending the indefensible till the last minute, but from the Liberal Democrats and then from Labour. That's not a business-like way to run a bank. No, the Treasury needs to sit down with RBS, with the board, and actually have a new bonus regime that says you've got to be delivering on all the key targets before you get any bonuses. And lending to business is the absolute key target. I mean, that is why, a big part of why the British economy is so stagnant, because RBS, the biggest lending bank to small business, is not doing its job.
What about the remaining share bonuses, which we know Stephen Hester is in line for potentially up to £6 million? Do you think he should relinquish those too?
well, I think it needs to be renegotiated. All in favour of Mr. Hester or anyone else earning plenty of money from RBS if he runs the bank to do what really matters. And if he won't lend to small business as he promised, he shouldn't get any bonus. Clearly, he's doing the right thing now in de-risking the bank, in cutting it down. But I mean, Mr. Huracan, who runs the investment bank, I mean, he was recruiting a year ago. It's only now that they're getting on with cutting it back. So I don't think he deserves a bonus either.
Matthew Oakeshott, thanks very much. So, Simon, as we see, although Stephen Hester, as it were, walked the plank on the bonus front, still a lot of pressure for the whole bonus issue to be re-examined.
Norman, more from you later. For now, thank you very much.
Well, we can speak a little more on this now with Chris Roebuck, a professor at Cass Business School. Good morning to you. The feeling very much that this was an inevitable decision by Mr. Hester.
Yes, he came under significant pressure, and when the vote was starting to rear its ugly head, it was obviously concluded that he had to give in. But the comments that are being made this morning about, well, effectively now we've dealt with Mr. Hester, we now need to deal with everybody else, we need to clamp down on bonuses at RBS, and that will make everything right, it is a complete travesty of the reality of the situation. This is not just an RBS problem, this is a sector problem, as we will no doubt hear when we hear the announcement of other chief executives' pay, which is likely to be 5 million, 6 million or more. That's just the British banks. On top of that, you have the chief executives of the other banks across the world against which our chief executives are being measured. The real challenge is going to be if you clamp down on the bonuses in RBS, people will just walk 50 yards across the road into Deutsche Bank and earn money for Deutsche Bank rather than a British bank.
And it's probably true to say that the British public, though, who are so appalled by these bonuses, are looking for government action on the whole issue.
Absolutely.
But is that unrealistic, the idea that government can then somehow interfere and start legislating about bonuses in private corporations?
Well, we get to the point of saying, are we going to have a vote on Stephen Hester's pay in the House of Commons every year? And then what are we going to do about the pay of the Lloyd's chief executive? And what about the pay of other chief executives? The problem is that having a go at Mr. Hester hasn't dealt with the core problem, which is that the pay of senior executives, not just in banking, has got adrift from the pay of most of society. And there needs to be some mechanism to bring it back. The problem with banking in particular is that it's not just a British business, it's a global business. There are about 23 large international banks in the city, of which only 3 are British. The other 20 will determine how much they pay on global levels. They do not have British shareholders, they did not take money from the British government, and to be blunt, they don't care what the British government thinks. They will pay what they want to pay. If the British banks in London don't match that pay, all their people have to do is walk across the road to get more money. And you and I, if offered 20% more money to walk across the road, would probably do it.
OK. Professor Chris Roebuck from Cass Business School, thanks very much.
Well, let's speak to our business editor, Robert Peston, who's on the phone now.